Good evening. Tonight on the Richie and Rogue show, our hearts are heavy as we pay tribute to a truly formidable woman who left us far too soon, the one and only Ann Widdecombe. Ann wasn't just a politician. She was a woman of unshakable principle, fierce intellect, and that unmistakable straight-talking style that made her a household name. From her years as a respected Conservative minister to a passionate fight for Brexit, and right through to her later work with Reform UK, Ann stood exactly where her conscience told her to stand. And she never wavered. She was incredible. She brought the same honesty and conviction to our airwaves as she did to the House of Commons. Whether you liked her, you loved her, or you agreed with her or not, you always knew exactly where she stood. And she had that rare gift, that gift where she can make you smile, even whilst making her valid and strong point. You see, she was deeply rooted in her Catholic faith, which she embraced with total commitment and lived by a strong moral compass that guided every part of her life. So, Richie, you met her in 2019, didn't you? And I just want to hear your memories about her because I didn't get to meet her, and I really, really wish I did, because everything that I have heard about her was just so incredible. It was all so positive. And I just want to see Ann through all of your eyes tonight.
Well, I think firstly, Rogue, honestly, your monologue there, the opening remarks, just typify exactly what Ann was about. She was a fearless woman she had deep convictions, and if you ever debated her, God help you, would be my words I would say, because even if you disagreed with her, she had this capability to debate in such a way where you just went, yes, ma'am. She almost had that kind of Thatcher kind of authority, which is very rare in British politicians these days. But more than that, she was loved by a lot of people, not just in a political life, but in a public life. She was in Big Brother, she was on Strictly Come Dancing, which I'm sure we'll come to a bit later. But I met her first in 2019, is when I was speaking at a Brexit Party conference in Newport. And before I went onto the stage, she grabbed my hand and squeezed it tightly. And she's about 5 foot. She's down there, right? She's really small, but she's the kind of woman you'd never mess with. If I was going to go to war, I want to take someone like Ann with me, for example. And she grabbed me by the hand and said to me, go and sock it to them, boy, go and sock it to them. And I went out this little town in a place called Usk in South Wales, called Little Mill. And after I finished, she grabbed my hand again and she said, Richard, first time she ever heard me speak, she said to me, don't let anybody or anything put that Welsh fire out. And those words have remained with me ever since. And I've watched her career. She was elected in 1987 as a Conservative MP. She crossed the floor as well to join the Brexit Party. She was just an extraordinary woman, a titan of a woman. And I was honored in those short few moments, apart from our guests, which we're going to bring on in a few moments. I'm excited to have our guests on because they're exceptional. They're probably the best guests we've ever had on the show, really. So just want to say that. Those brief encounters, though, Rogue, were just incredible. And I think you would have loved her. You would have got on with her. Being such a strong woman yourself and opinionated like you are, in a good way, you really would have got on with her. She would have liked you a lot. I really, honestly, I really believe that. She was an extraordinary woman. It's a great loss, actually. And of course, as we'll discuss tonight with our guests as well, what's happened and what's unfolding, even as we're on air right now, things are unfolding, stories are unfolding. Yeah. But for me, it was more the case of the fact that she didn't take crap off anybody, but she didn't do it in an unkind way. She did it from her convictions. She was a woman of principle. Yes, a religious woman who stood for her principles. Her family were involved in the Anglican Church. I think her brother was a canon in the Anglican Church, and nephew was a priest in the Anglican Church. So, and then she became a Roman Catholic. She converted to Roman Catholicism. So her story is quite unique. She was an extraordinary woman, someone that I personally, I would have struggled to debate, and I'd have go to anything, but I wouldn't have taken on Ann Widdecombe. She was formidable. But more importantly tonight, two of our guests, Rogue. We're so excited to have these on, especially, of course, it is our good friend, Howard Cox from Fairfield, UK, who's regular on the show here. And we have the extraordinary, the best watched and most watched show in the whole of the UK, the best in the world, the Mike Graham Show. It is the absolutely wonderful Mike Graham. Good evening, guys. Good evening.
Oh, you're muted. Hello, guys. Right. Sorry, that's my bad. So, yep, you're all on. So, guys, you know, it's just been a massive shock to the system. And, you know, we know that you've had a beautiful relationship with Anne and you've known her for years. And ultimately, you know, as the news unfolded, obviously, first of all, we'd heard that she died and everybody's like putting their tributes out to her. And then she's been murdered. You know, this is just horrific. And as it's unfolding, the shock waves that are going through the country are huge. And, you know, Mike, I'd love to know, you know, how you felt when you first heard that she'd passed, you know, and then to find out that it was murder. I mean, what do we do with that?
Well, I know it's been horrible. I got a message on quite late Thursday night, and you know I get up pretty early, so I had this message from a guy that it's not that well known to me, so I didn't really do much about it. The message said, "Is it true about Ann Widdecombe?" This was around about 10:30 on Thursday night, and I looked at it, and I didn't really think much of it. I went to sleep. I woke up in the morning. I'm led to. I think I'm right in saying that the announcement from the family came out around about 5:30, 5:45 on Friday morning, I guess it was. And so by the time I got to work, I get there about 6 o'clock. It was there. I discussed it with my producer, Charlotte. I said, well, we kind of have to lead off with this story. You know, obviously we had other plans. And suddenly I was like, well, we have to. And we had this amazing montage that we used to start her show with, which was a little speech about, you know, free speech, where she said, you know, nobody has the right to be offended. You know, the one where she says you're either a snowflake or you're a dictator. You know, just brilliant. You know, and we used to play that every time we started, because she was on every week with us, every Monday. She should have been on today at 8:40, always the same time, always on time, always reliable. And it was pretty shocking. And I couldn't quite. Well, I was okay until we got Bishop Kai Dura on, and when he did his eulogy to her, I suddenly hit me, you know, that she was dead. And it was tough, really tough. You know, I've done a lot of shows which have been tough, but nothing's been tougher than that. And that was bad enough. And then in the afternoon, when it suddenly became clear that again, when somebody texted me and said, we think she's been murdered, I was like, what? Yeah. How is that even? Who would murder Ann Widdecombe? Like, it doesn't bear thinking about. And I suddenly realised I don't know anyone that's ever been murdered. You know, I don't. And now I do. And I really didn't know what to do with it. I'm sure, Howard, you feel the same. I don't know what to do with it. You know.
Yeah. Howard?
Sorry, Howard. Mike, I saw you on that show with Bishop Kai Dura, and you were clearly very emotional. And you've been a consummate professional broadcasting for years and years. And for you to break down in that way, obviously it affected you massively, as you've already pointed out. You know, you've never been close to anyone who's been murdered. Right. I mean, that must have been, you know, going on air, finding that out. That must have been so difficult to continue the show, you know, to carry on with the rest of the program, you know, and get through the stories. It must have been so difficult.
Well, on Friday, I mean, I was in tears because of what Kai Dura said about her as a woman. At that point, I didn't know it was murder. At that point, I just was sad that she died, because she'd seemed, you know, she'd been on with us the 2-3 days before. She'd seemed to be her usual self. She was funny, engaging, you know, very entertaining person to interview. We'd been talking about prisons, funnily enough, because she was, of course, a prisons minister in John Major's government, and she knew a lot about prisons, and she felt very strongly about, you know, law and order and all of those good things that Conservatives are meant to care about, before David Cameron came along and decided to ruin it all, you know, and start hugging them all instead of locking them up. And, you know, it was like a breath of fresh air talking to her, because the Labour government was saying, oh, you know, we're going to have 14,000 new prison spaces in 2031. I'm like, 2031? How many people do you think are going to need to go to prison between now and then. It's like 5 years away. And I said, well, hey, here's an idea. Why don't you get rid of the 14,000 foreign criminals in our prisons, and then you got 14,000 spaces tomorrow.
Yeah.
And she was all for that.
Exactly.
She was like, yeah, absolutely, bring it on, and yeah, so later on in the day was when I discovered that she was dead, and I'd gone down to see my family in Sussex, and I was just I just kept pacing around. I couldn't take it in. I literally couldn't take it in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, grief and shock. So the first part of grief is obviously the shock, because it's like, I can't process this. How do I process that somebody was supposed to be coming on the show, or somebody was supposed to be with me, when you then have to kind of understand, and then you start to think about what she went through, what she suffered, and then you having to kind of carry that, and again you still can't process that. So this is all part of a grief stage, and it's horrible to go through because we don't have the answers, and that's another thing, isn't it, Howard?
Yeah, it was 5 o'clock in the morning. Jenny and I, my wife, we would go and walk the dog every morning in Hempstead Forest, and it's beautiful, because partly we go that early because it's so bloody hot later on in the day. So we go out, that sort of thing. We got back, had a bit of breakfast about 6:15, and I looked at, I suddenly got a WhatsApp message to say that Ann Widdecombe had died, and I thought, what? Okay, fine. I didn't even think if there was any, any impropriety or whatsoever. And the fact she'd been murdered, we learned later on. And I thought, well, she was fighting fit. She'd only texted me about 5 days beforehand about something to do with well, I won't bore you with the details, might come up later on. But fundamentally, I've been in communication. And then the Mark Dolan had interviewed her on Talk TV that morning, and she was fighting fit. She was supposed to go on to Channel 5, I think, at lunchtime. And in between that time, something happened. And now we're hearing, I don't know if you saw Dan Wootton tonight. He's got some evidence to show that there was a WhatsApp of her phone was at 9 o'clock in the evening of that day. So there's a lot of things. Was she imprisoned? Was she held hostage? All those sorts of things. And when we learned, just like Mike said, my lump hasn't left my throat. I've been in, and I watched Mike's show and everything, and I've got huge respect for you, Mike. We've known each other a long time, and I watched you on that, mate. I'm delighted you actually, felt to show your emotions on that one, for the most fantastic woman I've ever met. She inspired me big time over the years, and we probably talk about various, anecdotes of being with her and everything. When I was asked to stand by Richard Tice to become London Mayor, she spoke to me about 2 or 3 weeks later, because I'd already said no, and she said, "You do it, Howard, you'd be brilliant at this," and everything. And we had a long chat. I said, "I don't want to do this. I'm not a politician. I'm just a boring old public affairs campaigner." And they said, "No, you'll be brilliant. You'll be great, because your attention to detail." She was really building me up. It was most a wonderful feeling. She was, giving me these emotional and intellectual cuddles that I don't get from people. And everyone thinks she's a battle axe. In fact, I think she's been cited by, the Hamiltons, Christine Hamilton, her book, The Battle Axe, and she was one of them. But she put her by the side of Margaret Thatcher and Boadicea. So it's not bad company, is it? But seriously, it's the biggest shock. I can't believe it. And I don't know anyone who's been murdered either, Mike. I totally agree with you. And I'm walking around in shock. I can't believe it. I've done several things. I even did a tribute on BBC. They asked me to come aboard because she was also my MP for 20 years. And that's how I originally got to know her. And obviously I got to know her because of London Mayor. And she also, I don't know how many hustings and how many platforms I spoke with. It must be something like 30 or 40 we spoke together. And they didn't come to see me. They came to see Ann Widdecombe. And, she absolutely held the whole audience in her hand. And if she was heckled, she just destroyed them in the most, you didn't know you're being told off. But she was just great at this communication. And her attention to detail. Never used notes. I never saw her use notes ever. And,
No.
Her brain is just, I just can't believe she's not with us.
I know. She was such a brilliant woman. I mean, I first met her a long time ago, and I think you probably knew her better than I did, Howard, because I'm not going to make out that I was close friends with her, because I wasn't. But I've interviewed her over the years pretty solidly, I would say, at least once or twice a month for about 7 or 8 years, right? But I actually first met her back in the 90s when she was in John Major's government, because I was working for the Daily Express. It's not when they still had a half decent newspaper, Although later she became a columnist for them and was very happy to do so. But we used to have these lunches, and I got to the point where I was assistant editor or something of the paper, but I was in charge of production or whatever, and they would occasionally, Sir Nicholas Lloyd was the editor, and his wife was Eve Pollard, who some of you might know, a very flamboyant woman. And so every now and again he'd have a sort of member of the government in for lunch, and they had this boardroom where Lord Stevens used to sit, and it was overlooking St Paul's Cathedral. It was all very grand, and we sat there, and I think it was her. I think it was only about two other women, and she remarked on the fact that they seem to be a bit of a minority, which is, I don't mind that. She said, because obviously, we're cleverer than you are, so three of us can probably take on 12 of you. It's not really a problem for us, and that was quite funny. And then at the end of it, she went, right, so I suppose some of you people are going back to work, are you? And all these executives were sitting there nodding and scraping and they were, oh yes, we're all going back to work after. And she went, and how many of you will actually do any work? And it was brilliant because newspapers, being what they are, were full of tossers who didn't do any work at all and who just sat there like pretending to do work, signing things, and you're going, oh, I'm very important, and taking a big salary. And so she got it in one. I mean, she came into a national newspaper and sort of humiliated the chief executives, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Speaking of papers, sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
Yeah, speaking of papers, I mean, what a lot of people don't know about as well, she wrote a few books as well, fictional as well. I mean, a lot of people know this, and of course, her autobiography as well, but she wrote quite a few books. She was a prolific author as well. And obviously her appearances on television, her public profile was huge. I mean, she was, a lot of people who didn't understand politics. I remember watching her in Big Brother, and you got to see a different side to the Ann Widdecombe, the kind of, the politician that wouldn't take in any prisoners. And it was just a delight for the public to see. And I think, she won the hearts of so many people, Mike, because she was such, she never married, never had children, but she lived life to the full. She literally did. I mean, and I remember as well, one of my anecdotal things is this. Whenever there was a conference, more people were excited. Sorry, Nigel Farage, if you ever get to watch this. More people were excited about listening to her speak than they were Nigel. They were like, oh, and that's what we've come for. I mean, it was just extraordinary. But Nigel did pay homage to it in that. He understood that. And they had such a wonderful relationship. And, as has been proven, as we've seen, and we're going to show a bit later, some of the tributes that have been paid by Nigel. Sadly, the left have tried to hijack that and everything else, which we'll talk about. But they had such a wonderful relationship. And she had such a high regard for Nigel because she recognized what he was trying to do for the country. And that says a lot about the woman who had served the Conservative Party, from 1987 to 2010, I believe it was. So in fairness, I mean, she was someone who stood by her conviction. She never changed, did she? She was always consistent.
No, and I think that's important in politics, these days, because so many people do change. I mean, look at the government we've got now. I mean, every single member of it has flip-flopped on one thing or another throughout the course of the 2 years they've been in. Andy Burnham's flip-flopped. He's not even in charge yet. God knows what he's going to do, but it's probably not going to be good. But yeah, I mean, people have said that when she was speaking in the House of Commons, it was generally full up because people wanted to listen. And I always remember the nice little, because I asked her once when she used to sit in that little office room of hers down in Dartmoor, and all of the books behind her, because we, in this day and age of Zoom calls, people look at the background and go, oh, what's all that? And all these books were behind her, and it's all the copies of Hansard, which is obviously the record of what's said in the House of Commons, and it was all her speeches. So every single one of those books was full of her speeches, and she had them bound and put in a bookcase, and that's how much she was active, how many speeches she made. It wasn't just that was that day; it's just her stuff.
Yeah. Well, Richard Tice actually gave a tribute today. I have to say it was a very good one. I know we're not getting on these days because of the way I left the party, but I sent him a text. It's a great tribute. And one of the things he said is that in the time she was in Parliament, she made 8,000 contributions on the House of Commons floor. 8,000. It's just mind blowing. And going back to the thing, I used to read her Daily Express column quite a bit. She even wrote half a column about me, which was lovely because of the Fairfield UK stuff. And which I didn't expect. I didn't ask for it. She just did it because
Yeah.
She knew that, and she was trying to help me with the London Mayor bit, which was good. But there's no one with a bigger heart, and that she may appear to be, and she would put people in their place. And your point, Richie, earlier, I'm 6'4", and I've got so many pictures that are on the stage with her. And the number of times she said, "Could you sit down, Howard?"
Said to me, and I think he said it in House of Commons later, but he said it on my show this morning, that even though he was, towering over her, he just looked up to her, even if she was standing next to him. And whenever she rang on the phone, he would stand up. There are some people like that. The phone rings and you go, "Who's that?" "Ann Widdecombe." "Oh, Christ!" And you stand up.
Yep.
You feel like you better be standing up when you're talking to her.
She's like a matron, like when you're really sort of scared of somebody at school, it's like, "Oh my God, okay, I'll do as I'm told, otherwise I'm going to get into trouble."
But in a good way, though. But not like not in a bad way. She was funny. She was engaging. She was charming. And she was just, eccentric. I mean, I was watching, was it Ian Dale? I think it was an Ian Dale interview, and I had him on today as well. And he was.
Where's Mike gone? Mike, your sound's gone.
Oh, has it? Sounds.
You're back now. Yep, you're back now.
Yeah, she was talking to some interview she gave, and she said somebody came up to me and said, "The thing with you, Anne, is you're a bit odd." And she said, "Yeah, I am a bit odd." And great, good. And that's what we need, is more odd people in the world,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I think she spoke beautifully and eloquently. And like you said, she commanded authority. When she spoke, everybody had to sit and listen. And we're going to go to the speech that you were just talking about there, that you were going to play. So it's...
the right to live their lives, being protected from offence or from insult or from hurt feelings. It is an occupational hazard of living in society. And if you really can't take it, become a hermit. But more seriously, on the opposite end from the snowflakes, poor little darlings, on the opposite end from them are the totalitarians. And that was how Hitler was so successful, because he did not allow any free speech whatever. And if you spoke out against that sickening regime, or indeed against the Soviet Union, 2 minutes more, no, I need at least 5, or spoke out in the Soviet Union, you would end up in prison, if not worse. Totalitarians like to curtail your right to disagree with state orthodoxy. Now, for state orthodoxy, substitute the words social orthodoxy. As exemplified by social media, Twitter, and other such places where people decide what is and what is not acceptable. Now, I would love to stand in this union and oppose and argue with and take to pieces a Holocaust denier. But if we say no, we can never have the Holocaust denier, because his views are so offensive that he cannot be accorded a platform. Then what happens? That sort of viewpoint is driven underground, where it can quite often flourish. And people whisper behind their hands, "Oh, there's something in what he says, but we're not allowed to hear it." Let's hear it. And by hearing it, we can destroy it. We should...
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, that moment when the adjudicator threw the note at her and said, "You've got 2 minutes left," and she throws it back and says, "No, I've got 2 minutes. I need 5 minutes to finish this." I mean, what do you say to that? Like, they had no choice. I just love that classical moment from Anne. Absolutely beautiful.
She meant business.
And also what she sums up is a very traditional kind of British way of operating, where, you go to these foreign countries, and, I remember going with my dad across to parts of Europe when I was a kid, and, there'd be Italian border guards and French border guards, and everywhere you went, you had to change your money into different currency, and, you'd have all these very officious people who we didn't really have in Britain. We've got them now. Now everybody in Britain's officious. Don't do this, don't do that, drive at 20 miles an hour, don't walk there. walk to the left, stand behind that guy, make sure that you're not too close. Shut up. And she was like, no, I'm not doing it. So this guy gives her a note to say, you're done in 2 minutes. Bugger off. I'll tell you when I'm done. And I've grown up like that. And that's why I had an immediate affinity with her, because I was like, you take no shit. Sorry for swearing.
Right.
You take no shit from anybody. And you do what you do, and you do the right thing. And people like Ann Widdecombe are the absolute backbone of this country, right? And look at all those absolute morons who were giving her a hard time in death. And you go, is this where we've gone? Is this where the country's flipped? Yeah. Because I'm not happy about that at all.
No.
I think it's utterly revolting. And, you look at it and you just think, I cannot even begin to imagine how her family are feeling watching the disgraceful comments coming through. And there is a trans called Heather. Did everybody see lovely Heather?
Heather Herbert.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. She is absolutely
Can we not call her she, please? Can you call
It's
it
a he.
That's why
It's
I said
a
he.
he.
Yeah, he, she. So the comments, and some good news for once. I hope it was an extremely painful death. And I hope that she was handcuffed to the bed as she screamed in agony. Like, who the hell says anything like that and think that that's acceptable? I mean, to put it out there, and you look at Lucy Connolly and you look at what happened to Lucy, and then you look at the comparison here, what's going to happen to Heather, he, she? I just don't even understand how they can get away with this.
Well, he's probably going to be running in the 340 at Haydock, by the looks of him.
Yeah, so with the teeth like that, Mike. Yeah, that don't surprise me.
Put a bit in his mouth and start riding him, I think. And that puts him kind of point.
I know.
So I was just going to say, the left show their colours, and like this, they can't debate. They rely on violence. And you look today. I mean, one of the worst, of course, is Dan always says sly news. Look at Adam Bolton, what he said. Question her virginity, being a spinster and an old maid, and all those things. How dare he do that on the day that she died? I can't believe it. That man, how he got it. I mean, I went straight onto Twitter and demanded that Sky actually sack him on the spot there, and he's come back with an apology, which is completely and utterly pointless. Really, I mean, it makes him feel good, but I'm afraid I was talking to Alison Pearson today about various things like about this, and she's saying the same thing. And I think there's going to be a move to try and get rid of Adam Bolton from our airways for good.
Well, it's not just him, though, is it? There's been a number of sort of Mike's.
I think actually that Anne would say, no, don't cancel him. Just let him
continue
to make himself look like an idiot. She would go, no, let's not cancel him, because that's what they do to us, right? I prefer Kelvin McKenzie's view, where he called Adam Bolton Manjaro resistant. Because clearly, no matter what he does, he just keeps getting bigger, And I've thought about this a lot. And your first reaction is always, you get these people off the air, absolutely disgusting, right? But actually, the more that they continue to go on the air at Sky, the smaller their audience will get until they disappear up their own arse. Same goes for Times Radio. This guy is a disgrace, but let him keep saying all the things that he says and make himself look a twat.
It's a good point, Mike. She would definitely say that, because she thought freedom of speech was sacrosanct, and there's no doubt about it. There's nothing. I mean, she said it there, didn't she, when she was talking to the Oxford Union? Exactly. And
I think we have to be careful, because in celebrating her life, and that's what we're doing tonight. That's why I'm having a glass of wine, because I feel like I've had a couple of really bad, difficult days, and now I want to feel like I'm going to celebrate her life. And I don't know how I'm going to feel tomorrow, because it might not be better. But I think she was, one of the reasons she was great was because she did tolerate other people's views, and she didn't. And we don't want to turn into them. We don't want to be them. We don't want to be those people who hate just because they disagree with you, or who want to kill you because they don't like what you think.
No,
yes, it would have been wonderful. I never had a Twitter account at all, did she at all, right? I would have loved it if she had, because I can imagine her responses to people like Dan Hodges and some of these left-wing journalists and, all this kind of stuff. I mean, she would have rebutted them brilliantly, as she normally does, because she had a way with words, the way of framing words as well, without being offensive back to them. We all agreed, freedom of speech, the right to be offended. And she said that in her Oxford Union speech there.
Yes.
And I think one of the things we can do in her memory, and as you point out, Mike and Howard, and Rogue mentioned at the start, she was fearless for the freedom of speech. And I think cancel culture is something we're fighting against constantly. And we've got to allow these voices to be heard. Otherwise, it's the secret thing. It's like, oh, we're doing... No, we want open debate. Come on, bring it on. We're not afraid to take people on. Mike, you've had them on your show. You've had people on your show totally hate the guts off you. And you've invited them on. You know, it's what you do, you know, because that's how freedom of speech works, doesn't it?
Of course. And that's what you have to do. And if her legacy is anything, you know, that's what it should be. We did a poll today, and you know, it was partly I was expecting to get a sort of slap from the celestial skies above me, because I thought, you know, the last thing she'd want would be people talking about her in this kind of way, you know, in terms of what, you know, should there be a statue built to her? We asked if there should be a kind of a posthumous damehood, maybe some kind of a scholarship of some kind. And actually, Jacob Rees-Mogg was on the show, and he said maybe a scholarship would be good, because you know, that would be something that she would want to do, because one of the things that she was famous for was really being a good mentor to young people who came into politics, whether they were just getting into reform in the last few years. I mean, I saw a reform conference last year, and, you know, she was always talking to younger people and encouraging them to get involved and saying to them, you know, don't worry about all the terrible things that people will say to you. And in Parliament, the same, when she was kind of, you know, relatively senior MP, and it's quite a snobby place, Parliament, you know, Westminster, and a lot of MPs just don't talk to you. She made a point of always going up to the youngsters and the newbies and saying, you know, if you need anything, come and talk to me. If you need any advice or how to do anything, you know, so she would probably hate the idea that we're all discussing what her legacy should be. But it would be nice to have something. I think a statue would be good, and I'd like to put it in Westminster. Because it would
I voted for that, Mike, this morning. I voted for the statue, so I was one of those. I did, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds a really beautiful, honouring piece. So I just want to go to Trevor, actually, because Trevor, he gave you know, his ideas and thoughts all around, you know, Anne, and I think it's just really beautiful just to hear other people's views.
We can say is that Britain has lost a unique political voice. I met Anne many times. She was a formidable interviewee and always came well prepared with her own point of view. She was, in fact, a very modern politician who combined the talents of a gifted TV entertainer with those of a legislator. She knew how to create an image and a story about herself. The take-no-nonsense, plain-speaking, Christian evangelical 21st century Boudica. As a consequence, perhaps she attracted many unkind comments from opponents and rivals, some unnecessarily personal. She very seldom responded in kind, sticking to the issues rather than personalities, which is perhaps why her violent murder has brought a flood of warm and admiring tributes. Wouldn't it be wonderful in this era of vicious social media takedowns if everyone in politics and media took a lesson from her example and started to treat their opponents with a little of the generosity they bestow on them when they're no longer around?
Yeah. I mean, you know, oh, there's some really bad feedback. Can you hear that?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, that's quite hard.
Yeah. I'm just going to mute a minute. There you go, I just muted Mike. I think that's part of the problem. So, yeah, I mean, there are so many beautiful things. And again, we were saying earlier, Richie, about how, again, Farage has, you know, laid his wreath and, you know, paid his condolences. And yet you still have people from the left trying to hijack that. So tell me more about that, and then we'll play the video.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was absolutely disgusting. I mean, look, they were close friends, right? Not just in politics. They've been close for many, many years, right? She was with him as an MEP in the Beast of the Belly in Brussels, as we called it. And, you know, when she was, the speech that she gave there, I'm sure we'll play it in the show in a few moments. I mean, it was just outstanding. And she really believed in the project of Britain being a sovereign nation and not being controlled by international bodies like the UN, the WEF, the WHO, and everything else. You know, and for Farage then to go and lay a wreath along with Richard Tyson, Zia Youssef, and many of the other members of MPs from Reform, as a mark of respect which you'd expect them to do. I mean, and he, you know, I listened to him speak after he laid the wreath, and it was from his heart. But then you had people jumping on social media saying, "Oh, this is all staged," and they were putting up a video from 2024 of him rehearsing a walk that he was doing to come to camera to film a, you know, piece to camera. And they were saying, no, he rehearsed this. It was disgusting, absolutely. You know, I was so fucking angry. Excuse my language. I was just like, and I'm not a Reform member. I'm not a member of any political party, but I think it was just disgusting the way that journalists, including them as well, and left-wing commentators were portraying that Farage was doing this as a political stunt. No, the guy is grieving. I mean, I heard Richard Tice Howard mentioned it earlier, giving his tribute to Ann Widdecombe in House of Commons today. And you know, I sat there watching in front of the television, and I thought, you know what? And I messaged him as well, same, and said, you know, unbelievable, well done, brilliant message. But we didn't, when Joe Cox died, right? Or other MPs, David Amos, for example, who she was the she was the godmother of his daughter or son, wasn't it? Or something like that. There was a connection there, wasn't there? I mean, it's just we don't react the way that they do. You know, the be kind lot, you know, all that kind of rhetoric. It doesn't really work. And I was disgusted by the fact that we had people on social media calling Farage all kinds of things because he simply laid a wreath and gave a speech saying how warm and how lovely Ann Widdecombe was, and how she loved to walk on the Devon Meadows or whatever it's called out there, out in the open in that place where she lived. I mean, you know, it just pissed me off. I mean, it really did, really pissed me off.
Let's watch the video with Farage now. You can feel it, can't you? It's tangible. Everybody's feeling it. We're all sitting here now, you know, and we are feeling the pain. You know, there is a loss. There is like an Ann-shaped hole in all of us now because, you know, she was so formidable. I mean, there's no other word, is there? You know, she was there and everybody felt her presence. And so now we're all kind of having to reel back. And, you know, when you've got the left who are doing what they're doing, I mean, there was another woman actually who's had to close her account down. And I actually called it out because she is called Isa, but her ex-name is Flamenco Tears. But she was threatening Nigel. She was saying, it's Nigel next. Now, I mean, if that is not a death threat right there, I don't know what it is. You know, so I think her account, she's either logged out and completely, you know, sort of gone AWOL, or they've just closed it down because you can't have people speaking this shit because it is a death threat right there. Mike, what would you say?
Absolutely right. I mean, the thing is, free speech is a very interesting concept, right? And I think Anne had it right. And I think most of us know in our heart of hearts what is right and what is not right. And if you are making threats against people, if you are breaking laws which already exist, and let's face it, we don't need any more laws around free speech. We don't need Starmer and his ilk to tell us what we can and can't say. But there's already criminal laws in place where if you incite people to violence or if you threaten to kill somebody or wish death upon people, you know, that is obviously something that shouldn't happen. And there should be punishments for that. And there pretty much are, really. But I mean, the thing that disturbs me more is not so much the nutters on Twitter and various other social media platforms, but the supposed, you know, sensible people, or as some people would call them, the grown-ups in the room. There's a woman called Natalie Fleet, Labour MP for Bolsover, right, who happens to be the Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls, believe it or not, right? She tweeted out something which is really quite extraordinary. She said this: Nigel Farage and his gang of bin men get the same security as the rest of us. I'm sick of the faux outrage. None of them cared when a senior Reform UK politician was sharing my death threats.
Jeez.
Right? So this is a serving minister in the government having a go at Reform and basically putting them on the chopping block and saying they're getting the same protection as everybody else, which they're not actually. She then she deletes it, right? Today puts out a tweet saying, "Apologies for offence caused by my earlier tweet, which I've now deleted. My thoughts are, as they have always been, with Ann Widdecombe's loved ones at this awful time." But, I'm sorry, just fuck off, will you?
Exactly.
Sorry, just fuck off.
Fuck off. Absolutely. You can't say something as prolific as that and then retract it. You just can't, because we've all seen it. We all know what you think, and you just can't. You can't go back on that, I'm afraid.
Well, that's one of the issues, big time, is Lucy Connolly. You know, her thing. And she took it down 4 hours. Yes, it was a silly, emotional tweet. Yeah, but she got 31 months a sentence. That's why I know she didn't serve that.
You know what, Howard? We all agreed with it at the time.
Yes, that's right.
You know what?
That's
if
right.
you didn't agree with it at the time, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, and there's also Peter Lynch. That he killed himself. These are the sorts of things. And there's about 800 people, isn't it? I think it's 800 people in prison because of hurty tweets or hurty social media. And yet these people, like that silly man, I call it it. I'm afraid that person. I hope that person gets 31 months at least.
Yeah,
I mean,
because it has to be a level playing field, and again. And that's nothing to do with free speech, by the way. It's everything to do with violent speech and everything to do with threats. We can't live in a society where people are frightened to go out. I've spoken to friends of mine now who are, nervous because they don't know what's going on. They're wondering how many of these nutters there are out there. This bloke, whoever he is, and I guess we'll find out in due course. What's interesting is that because they've now detained him on terrorism charges, they've got another 14 days before they have to charge him. So they've kind of extended the legal time that they can question him, right? Yeah. So that's good for us in a way.
But Mike, one of the problems we've got is they're now coming up with he's got learning difficulties.
Yeah.
There's the mental health issue.
Yeah, he'd have a lot of learning difficulties if I was finished with him.
Well,
it counts as 3.
Absolutely.
But the point is that, this nonsensical protection of people who are supposedly vulnerable, I don't believe it. I didn't believe it at the time. I put out a message on a video on Sunday because I'm not buying this bullshit from the police that, you're not supposed to speculate, right? I said, speculation is one thing. That's not what I was doing. What I was doing was asking questions. And one of my questions was, how is it possible for a guy who is apparently completely random to get into a car with a weapon, drive that car 370 miles south, at high speed, by the way, in a car which was supposedly not fit for purpose, had weeds growing out of it, gets to a place which he wouldn't otherwise have known unless he'd looked it up, where Ann Widdecombe lived, kills Ann Widdecombe, gets back in his car, drives back to Rotherham, and we're all supposed to believe it's some kind of random act. I mean, it's just crap. Rubbish.
Yeah.
I've got the footage here. Let me just have a quick look at this. I mean, we can see clearly there's something there, but the car's not covered in weeds, and allegedly the neighbour was saying that it was covered, in weeds and it hadn't been used, and so it's all very confusing because the first time it was like, oh, we've got a white man, we have a white man, and that's literally put out there straight away. Why are you putting that out there straight away? Because when it was a Welsh choir boy, you didn't tell him the colour then, did you? It's literally, we have to kind of stand here and go, okay, we need to trust the police, but you cannot trust the police. I certainly don't trust the police because I don't believe even this rhetoric now is even truthful. I mean, who actually believes it?
Yeah, well, I mean, who's filming that guy then? At that
exactly.
Point, And if they are filming him, presumably they're filming him because they think he's a bit weird and they live nearby and they see him get into a car. If it was me and I filmed somebody getting into a car with what looked like a weapon, I'd be calling the police to say, this is his registration, he's just got in a car, he appears to have some kind of weapon, I don't know what he's going to do, he's a bit odd, he's a bit of a weirdo, maybe you should go check it out.
Yeah, allegedly
do that? I don't know.
Yeah, allegedly, according to sources, they say that his father had passed away a year ago and left him the house, and he was a bit of a loner and a bit of a strange guy, according to some sources. So there's no justification either way. I mean, but I think the police, though, as we've seen before, guys, we've seen where they've not given the details out, and it's caused that vacuum of a space, if you like, of misinformation where people get angry because we demand to know. And I think, in this case in particular, people need to know what has happened. Yes, we have to wait for due process and police investigations, but they arrested one guy, then they released him. Then they arrested another guy, this 28-year-old man, and according to sources, he's apparently a bit of a loner. Some say it was a stick, some say it was a pole he was carrying, but he travelled over 200 miles in 4 hours from where is it, Rotherham down to I mean, he must have been driving a Porsche. I mean, because to get there that fast, I mean, it's premeditated, the whole thing. As Farage has rightly said, he pointed out this has been premeditated. It's a planned murder, but mainstream media will not go there. They're afraid to go there, aren't they?
Yeah, well, all this rubbish for people like Dan Hodges about, Reform are trying to cover up their, terrible stories about them, and it's complete rubbish. These people have become sort of deranged, Reform derangement syndrome they've got, and they see everything through this prism. A woman's been killed, a very substantial, important, woman who was a celebrity in a way in this country. That's a story. It's not, nobody's trying to cover anything else up. They're covering it because one, Reform politicians are worried that they're in the firing line, literally.
Yeah. Howard, how would you feel if you were a politician? What would you want to sort of see?
Well, I didn't get it to the magnitude that some of the politicians are getting it now. But when I was standing for London Mayor and I stood down in Dover, and I must repeat just how Anne helped me down in Dover considerably. She was wonderful, walking around, knocking on doors, doing all that sort of thing. But I've had death threats from the Greens mainly because of my support for diesel and petrol cars. I've had dog shit through the letterbox and and all this sort of thing. And I sometimes think when I was standing in Trafalgar Square doing a bit of speech and giving out leaflets and things, and people coming up to you, I did feel threatened. But what do you do? I mean, it's like Ben Habib has said, he doesn't want to walk around with people protecting him all the time. And Rupert Lowe says the same thing. But I'm afraid we've reached a situation where this government and perhaps previous governments have made our society divisive. And because of that, there are people on the extremes of those divisions who, unfortunately, will drive 200-300 miles down and just go and do something with a pole, beat the living daylights of a 78-year-old woman, and then drive back again and hope not to be caught. The point is, how they found this out, obviously it must be with CCTV. He parked on the drive. It wasn't a burglary because a burglar wouldn't park on the drive, would they? These are the
and there was nothing stolen.
Yes, exactly. And so, we're in a society now. I'm 71 years of age, and I just cannot believe what I'm in the last 10, 15 years, what's happened to our society. You mentioned back in John Major days, Mike, and, I remember that time, I saw the birth of a certain Ann Widdecombe and how she started coming on. She certainly hit the ground running with her speeches and performances in Parliament and, and her prison stuff. I mean, if she was, I still believe she should have been Prime Minister. That's how strongly I feel about the second female Prime Minister. We wouldn't have the problem with borders now, or immigration. We would have no problems with freedom of speech. We wouldn't have any of that shit that we're getting now by these cowardly, hidden agenda, nasty pieces of politicians we've got now. And I'm so angry about Andy Burnham. I had to write an article today for the Mail regarding, what is Andy Burnham going to do for the motorist. And I've written a couple of pages and they're going to edit it down. But basically, it's going to get worse because he's very close to Ed Miliband and he hates the driver.
Well, they hate, like all lefties, he hates anybody that's got any money. He's going to go after gains tax. He's going to go after anything he can get his hands on. If you've got a house, you've got a pension, you've got a car, if you've got any kind of, ability to make money, he's going to take it. It's a shocking state of affairs. And also they have encouraged, like that awful Natalie Fleet woman, a kind of demonisation of the right. So that people who are easily influenced and people who are possibly, a little bit deranged or mentally unwell can sort of look at these people. I mean, we saw it with Trump in America, and that's what we're seeing here. People shooting at the guy. People 3 times somebody's tried to kill him. And that's not what we do here.
Not at all.
No.
And I was about to
Right.
say, we feel like we're replicating, like even Charlie Kirk. You know, it's like
Yeah.
if we don't agree with what you're saying, we're just going to come and attack you. And death is not the answer. And I find it utterly disgusting and disturbing. You know, I mean, the age that I'm at, and then I look at my grandchildren and I fear for them. You know, what is happening? It is just a really, really precarious time for us all. You know,
Yeah.
and we need to make sure that things happen. We need to protect our children, you know, and people are doing certain things at the moment, you know, buying land up, you know, sort of training. They're trying to help themselves because, you know, we are at risk because the far right that we are deemed, you know, are being demonized. And because of that, we are, you know, we've got targets on our heads.
I think
But we can't let that stop us saying what we want to say either. You know, we
No.
need to still continue to be who we are. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that I'm willing to be some kind of martyr or anything, but I'm not going to change what I do.
Yeah,
I'm not going to, you know, shirk from what I say. Why would I?
good. I'm glad.
absolutely.
I mean, there was a question actually asked to Anne about how she would feel if she was a prime minister. So I want you to just have a look at this because she's great.
I think I would have been a first-class Prime Minister, but I don't think you'll find many of my colleagues would agree with me.
I think she's just brilliant. She
I
just
really
says it
first
as it is. I'd be brilliant, first class. She's just awesome.
I mean, she did carry that kind of weight of the old traditional politician that we, you know, some of us were lucky enough. I mean, I'm 51, but I do remember Thatcher at the dispatch box having those debates. You know, the Iron Lady. She had that kind of caliber. She had that kind of strength and ability just to take her opponents down, but in such a way, without slandering them, just tearing them apart with the words and her ability and intellectualism to do it. And Anne seemed to carry that. And I think she would have made a fantastic prime minister. I really, really do.
She beat Andy Burnham any day.
Yeah. Well, he's the result, I'm afraid, of Tony Blairism, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he was in Tony Blair's government in
Yeah.
1997, as much as he pretends that he's had nothing to do with politics for 40 years, and that's why there's something wrong with it. He's done nothing else. He's done literally nothing else but be involved in it. Having several ministerial positions. He stood next to Jeremy Corbyn when Corbyn was leader of the Labour Party. You know, he was Ed Miliband's right-hand man. He was Gordon Brown's minister for something or other, culture, media and sport, I think. You know, he was in Tony Blair's cabinet. You know, the guy is you know, inside and out. You cut him open. He's a politician. He's not a man of the people. He's not that bloke from up north that everybody's supposed to
King
like.
up north.
Yeah, I mean, give me a favour. You know, next he'll be wearing a flat cap and he'll turn up the wicket. You know, go, it's great. You know, I don't know how to get around London. Then you tell me how to get on the tube. I don't know how to get on the tube. You know, and then see all the scumbags jump in the gates without paying and see what he does about that. You know.
Well, he spends more time jogging than he does anything else, doesn't he? He's out jogging all the time.
If he
doing
only
videos.
jogs for like 5 minutes, he jogs to the car around the corner to get the picture done, and then he jogs back into the car and the car drives him home. You know, that's it.
It's like his tweets are like, "Come run with me, come on guys, come run with me." It's like, no, fuck off.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll tip him up. You know.
This time next week, isn't he Prime Minister?
Yeah.
No, don't.
Well, do you know
Yeah,
what my worst nightmare, right, is that I've heard this morning for the first time, that if England make it into the final of the World Cup, him and Starmer are going to go. So they're going to go to America and sit there and watch the World Cup together, and that will be the official handover of Britain, right? So presumably at some point in half time, Starmer will go, "Here you go, there's the keys to Downing Street. On you go, have a good time." It's unbelievable. It's absolutely
It's ridiculous.
Unless Trump intervenes and puts a block on their visa, we'll be all right.
Well, that would be nice. Yeah, we might have to make that request, actually.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's all tweet him.
Can't imagine anything worse. You know, it'll be a
Wouldn't it be
nightmare.
an incredible irony, though, England playing France in the final? You know, the France that we've given £600-700 million to stop the boats.
Presumably Burnham and Starmer were supporting France, weren't they?
Yes.
Oh God, I want to look at the beautiful memories of Anne, and just kind of, I just love the very fact that she like admits that she's like tone deaf. She can't hear a thing, and actually when she was on Strictly Come Dancing, you just listen to how she explains how the dancer with her was explaining how she had to do it, and she still didn't know how to do it. She actually treated it as a pantomime.
made it impossible. I mean, Anton was nearly tearing his hair out. And in the end, he solved it. He would start off by saying, well, you do this on the third beat. And I would say, don't be stupid. I can't hear beats. What do you mean? What is this beat thing? So in the end, he had to pick out words from the songs, because all the dance numbers, fortunately, were vocals. And he would pick out words from the song and say, on this word, you do this. On that word, you do that. That was how I learned. I never was dancing. I was doing a pantomime act. But I am going to do panto in December. And I will be doing a dance number in the middle of the pantomime because, as I've said to everybody, I spent 10 weeks doing a pantomime in the middle of a dance, so I might as well spend a few weeks doing a dance in the middle of a pantomime.
Oh, I just love her. And that yellow, she's just so sprightly.
That just made me cry, that did. You just made me cry then. What the heck?
Amazing,
Oh my
though.
gosh.
I mean, how many people could pull that off? Can you imagine Rachel Reeves trying to do that? You
No.
know, and the arena with her big cod hopper boots, you know.
Oh,
Really did
God.
something injury. No, she was just brilliant. She was everything she did. She was really, really brilliant at. And if she wasn't brilliant at it, she gave it a good go. And you know, that's what life is about, isn't it?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
she's so self-effacing, and how she said, I'm tone deaf, and I haven't got a clue. She was dancing to the word. He told him which word in a phrase on the song, and then you saw Anton try to lift her up.
It's just brilliant. Oh, I just love her. And you know, she had a love actually for poetry and for particular Susan Hill. Actually, it was her favorite author. And what I found fascinating actually, Susan Hill. Do you remember the horror movie Woman in Black? Yeah. Well, yeah, she'd written that, and I just thought, she's just absolutely brilliant. She's just everywhere, isn't she? In her likes, and I just thought Anne might be a little Christian, maybe, and maybe wouldn't sort of go down that line because I grew up in the church and we weren't allowed to watch anything like that. But the very fact that she loved lots of different genres, lots of different things, I just found her really she's amazing, absolutely amazing. Just watching how she behaves, just fascinating, and I'm loving her through you guys because I'm just trying to figure out who she is and what she stood for, and watching all you smile and just kind of love on her. And when we reflect, on her beauty, I just think it is just so, so important that we carry a piece of her each day. We have to remember, what was it for you? Say that again, Mike.
We put a portrait up of her in the middle of the show today, which is going to stay there for the rest of the time, because the nice thing about having your own studio is you can do what you like. And I've got a picture of my dog, Siggy, on one of the walls, and right underneath a picture of Ann Widdecombe. It's going to sit there for the rest of the time that we're able to do what we do, And one of the stories I'll tell you about having met her, like I say, 30 odd years ago. I saw her in the green room once in Ealing, where Howard will know, you've probably been there. I think you came to Plank of the Week and all that, and talked to. We had this genius idea to build a bloody studio in the middle of nowhere that nobody could get to. And it was about an hour away from Tower Bridge, London Bridge, an hour away from Parliament. And she'd found herself there because Piers Morgan used to like putting her on. Yeah. She was so feisty. And she'd take anybody on, didn't care if it was a terrorist or some kind of mad socialist or, some nutty Hamas supporting person. She would just say, "Go shut up." And I'd been down to Dartmoor actually fairly recently, and we were sitting in the green room, and we'd known each other a long time. Like I say, not as bosom buddies, but a long time. And I said, "Oh, I was down in your neck of the woods the other day, and it was great." She said, "Oh, really? Where were you?" I said, "I was in Bovey Castle." And she looked at me and she just went, "It's pronounced Bovey." And I went, "Okay then." And I was like, "That's me told," I couldn't go I couldn't say anything else. I was like, I've forgotten why I even said that, But
yeah, exactly.
I just had an idea there, Mike. I just had an idea. just get an idea. Plonk of the week, right? Which is fantastic, by the way. And myself and Rod had the privilege of being there. And
That was
we
brilliant.
drunk way too much. I think
idea.
we should. I think we should get the guys to make a whiskey and name it after Anne.
Yes.
Widdy whiskey. That's what we should do. And name it after her.
I saw Richard Tice said something like that along there. In fact, I know a couple of guys that have distilleries, so I might see if they can do that. That would be fun.
What a beautiful token, what a gesture, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Here's to Anne, absolutely.
Yeah.
When she left, obviously, sort of Parliament, and she kind of stepped down from all of that. And I wanted to know about her and politics and how she felt sort of after being in politics. And this is what she said.
It's a wonderful release. It's the release from responsibility. I'm very glad I did it. I wouldn't have spent my life any other way. I'm delighted I did it, but I am glad I'm no longer in the House of Commons.
What a relief. I mean, she made such an indent, and then, for her to kind of walk away from it. But then, you look at recently, she's actually, more and more things have been coming out about her revealing what is really happening, the elitists, and she was kind of stepping forward and being a bit bolder in what she was talking about. And, a lot of people are saying, and there is a lot of speculation, is this a target? Has she been targeted? Is it that this man is being blamed? We've seen, like, on shows like The Bill or whatever, you see these movies where actually you have somebody who has got special needs or is a little bit odd, and they get the blame. They are pinned with this crime, and then they can put it on that person, and actually it was already calculated and premeditated. And that's actually quite frightening, and this is why I don't believe anything the police are saying at the moment, because, like you were saying, Mike, like the whole story from coming all the way from north all the way down, to Dunwich, it's just not viable. In the timing, nothing makes sense.
No. And just, there is talk. I mean, obviously, now that they've changed the investigation into one being run by the anti-terror police, they've clearly found something. One can only assume they found something in his house, on his computer, some kind of clue as to. They've said that he wasn't known to prevent, so that we think that he hasn't been in trouble with the law before. But again, you don't know whether that's true, because they seem to change the story every 24 hours. But certainly, it's not out of the question, in my view, that this is a guy who might have been a bit simple, who was somehow radicalised in the same way that people like Rudy Kabana were radicalised by the Islamic terror, that this guy could have been somehow agitated into some kind of anti-female thing, could be a trans activist. I just don't know. But clearly, it's one thing we can be pretty sure about is that it can't now any longer be described as not political.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But in terms of the politics, though, Rogue, what you just asked about her politics, I think the Tories treated her really badly. At the end there. They were terribly badly. I mean, they didn't even give her a damehood or a seat in the House of Lords. For God's sake, if anyone deserved it, she did, all those sorts of things. I'm not sure if she would have taken it, to be honest. But the point is, the Tories, there's a lot of them eating humble pie today, I noticed, are saying that several have actually said we didn't treat her too well. They're coming out of the woodwork. I mean, people like Ian Duncan Smith said something on I think it was on Times Radio. I can't remember now, but he made the point that she didn't leave on a good note, and we have got to take a lot to blame for that. So, as I say, I repeat again, what a prime minister she would have been. We had Maggie Thatcher, trailblaze. You imagine having her sitting in number 10 now. We wouldn't be going through the shit that our country's going through now. We wouldn't have millions of people taking, benefits and all the other bits and pieces that are going on. We'd have people fully working, and the private sector would be booming. Yeah. This is under her. I know that would happen. I've had many a drunken session over whiskey with her, but she never got drunk. She just gets sort of tipsy. And, I remember in the hotel in Dover at night after my hustings, there's 3 or 4 of us sat down, and she sat down with me. And Howard, she actually asked me a question, said, "Did I do all right, Howard, for you tonight?" That's the sort of person that, and anyway, I bought her a whiskey, and the first thing she said, "It is a double, isn't it?" And anyway, but we talked about her politics and things like that. And I said, "What makes a good politician?" And he says, "Well, there's 2 things make a good politician: being stinking rich, or being truly honest." Yeah. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah, she's lovely. I mean, just listening to that, I feel closer to her already. But do you know what's really beautiful is her foundation, which was her relationship with God. She had a real zeal, she had a real faith, and it really sort of carried her, you know, with her relationship. So when she met people, she loved on you because, and she built you up. And like Howard, you were just saying, you know, she was giving you verbal hugs. She was loving on you and encouraging you. And we all need that, you know, every one of us needs to stick together. And when you have that one, like Mike said, you know, she was the spine, she was the backbone that held everybody together to bring that love and to bring that encouragement and to keep on moving, because she could see what was happening. She had a deep insight, and you can see that, you know. And she actually talked about her faith. So I just want to just go on to that. Just get bear with me.
Religion plays the major role in my life, and nobody of faith would tell you anything else. Because if you do believe, then it is going to affect, or should affect, everything you do.
Look, I mean,
I was getting rather disillusioned by the way the Church of England blew about with every fad and fashion and every change in the wind, and I rather admired the way that Rome said no. Something stands and falls by truth, not by popularity.
I love that. Popularity.
I was about to say there because I didn't see that second video come in there.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right, Liam. You're forgiven. No, it's look, her politics was driven by her faith. No question about it at all. Her convictions came from there. She was very outspoken on gay marriage, on LGBT stuff, you know, but she did it in such a way where she didn't hate people for choosing a certain life or sexuality. She did it out of her own belief and her own convictions. And there's very few people that can actually do that without sounding dogmatic or preaching at you or bashing you over the head and calling you sinful and evil. She had a way of doing it where it was, these are my beliefs. You don't have to accept them, but this is what I believe. I believe that is wrong and that is right. And, you know, it's very rare in politics you find that these days. And she had the ability to do that. And she was driven by her faith. You know, she was a strong believer. But I find the whole thing, I don't know if people know her background. She was an Anglican. She belonged to the Church of England. And she converted to the Roman Catholic Church, which in religious terms is a huge jump. It's a huge hurdle, right, to go from being a Protestant to a Roman Catholic. And her family were brought up in the Anglican Church as well. So it did play a very strong part. And she attended Mass every single Sunday. In fact, I think this week, I think it was yesterday, I've seen a service led at her home church where a Mass was done in remembrance of her. And the priest actually mentioned her during the Mass. And I thought it was a beautiful tribute that he paid to her. But it really did drive her as a woman. And she never moved from it. You could debate there on any issue. She was against abortion, against assisted dying. She was against all these things because that was her Christian beliefs, and she was very strong on it.
And she also had a huge amount of gay friends, masses of gay friends, and they respected. Look at Ian Dale, what he's been saying. I've been so impressed with Ian Dale, what he's said recently, and I've known Ian for some time. He's married to a guy, and likewise with Dan Wootton and people like that, and Harvey Proctor, a very good friend of hers, etc. All these people are incredible. They're gay celebrities, you could argue, but she didn't criticise them for being gay. It just didn't fit in with her faith. That's all it mattered to her.
Yeah. I mean, did she ever try and convert you guys? Was she ever kind of forceful in trying to allure you into God, or was she just very neutral and just explained who she was?
No, I mean, because we never, I don't think we ever discussed God. I don't think at any point we ever discussed it because it was never an issue. Because as far as old-fashioned, religious people are concerned, they don't come up to you and go, I've seen God. What are you going to do about it? That's what nutters do. That's what, crazy Christian evangelists do. That's what crazy imams do. Most people, religion is a very personal thing. Mm-hmm. And, I don't discuss my religion. I don't particularly have one. I was raised as a Catholic in the same way that she was a Catholic later in life. But it just never came up. Why would it?
No.
The only time I discussed religion with her was when she said she couldn't actually come to an actual event because it was on a Sunday. And but she did come to it in the evening. She did, but as long as she could get to 11 o'clock communion, Richie, you made that point just now. And I'm the world's most famous agnostic, and she knew that, but she never once put her feelings or faith onto me in any discussion we had. Never discussed it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So somebody asked her as well about power, and actually, did power excite her? And this is what she said.
Everybody should be excited by power because it's only another way of saying being in a position to do what you want to do. Florence Nightingale couldn't sit at home and say, I think we should have a nursing profession. We'd still be waiting there. She actually went out and did it. Mother Teresa didn't sit at home and say, oh, the poverty in Calcutta is disgusting. She went out and sorted it. And unless you're in a position to be able to sort things, no good. You've just got to sit at home and bemoan them. So, of course, everybody wants power. Unless you're in number 10, unless you're actually in government, you can't do things. You can have the best policy since sliced bread. Can't do anything. You need power.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I think she's going to be a great loss to Reform, because she was an absolute incredible asset when they went from the Brexit Party to Reform, and she became a spokesperson for them on immigration and many other things as well, justice as well. And she just had the ability to understand how Parliament works, which a lot of Reform MPs, of course, never been there before. They needed her experience and they lent on her a lot. And I think, she's going to be a great loss to the Reform Party. I really believe that. And she will not, you cannot replace Ann Widdecombe. That's one thing for sure. You cannot replace that woman.
No, I think not. And I think, Reform are, a movable feast, if you like. They're a different political party. They're trying to be a different political party. I mean, she would say that whenever I asked her if you're going to run again, are you going to try and be an MP? Are you going to try and give them a sort of backbone in the cabinet? She was like, no, I'm too old for that. Don't want to do that. Didn't want to do it. Didn't have any ambition in that direction. But I think enjoyed having conversations with people who were younger, maybe forming policy, putting ideas together for what they should be, offering the British public. I think she reached an age where she just wasn't really interested in the day-to-day working hard, because it's a hard job going into Parliament and, having to represent a party and having to play the game and all of those things that she'd done for many years. And so I think she was happy with her lot, and she performed a really good function for them, actually, because she was in many ways she was a sensible voice of reform in so many areas,
Yeah, I can imagine her telling Farage off a couple of times in private as well, and I think
I
he
would
would have
imagine
taken
that
it.
went on quite a bit, and he would take it from her as well, by the way.
Yeah.
It's interesting that when I stood twice for Reform, and obviously I was told to potentially I was going to be expelled because of my kind words about Tommy Robinson. Sorry about that, Mike, mentioning Tommy. But from I know your face, you know me better than that. But the point is, I got a phone call from Anne because she knew that I was going to leave, because before they threatened me with expulsion, I actually left. And she rang and said, do you think you're doing the right thing? She said to me, and I explained what's happened. She said, I think you are doing the right thing, Howard. I mean, it's wrong that you were criticised, you were treated badly. And even Isabel Oakeshott actually rang me and told me I was treated badly. It's the way it goes. And that's what my worry about Reform is, because I put my heart and soul into Reform. And Anne recognised that and was very kind to me about me leaving.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, I mean, the road to good intentions is paved with gold, as they say, or the road to, success is paved with good intentions. Whichever way around you want to say it.
Yeah.
That's too many wines, that is, Mike. You've got too many wines now.
It's tough. No, it's really tough for people in a party. I mean, they're trying to assassinate Reform as a political entity. There's no doubt that's what's going on.
Yeah.
Everybody can see it. Everybody knows what's going on. I personally know that News UK have said that they will never let Reform get into power. It's very clear that's the Times agenda. It's very clear that that's the Daily Mail's agenda now as well. Somebody's taken a decision, whether it's Kemi Badenoch doing a deal with them, but that's what's going on. And they are going to have real problems getting into power now, because this establishment is lining up against them.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I mean, you've seen it in Clacton, when they're not standing candidates and everything else. I mean, it's unheard of. When have the Conservatives never ever stood a candidate in any election, and they've chosen not to do it? And the whole thing, I mean, it's just absolutely, the establishment from media and politicians and parties, it's very clear to see. They know they're afraid of Nigel Farage. They're afraid of reform because they know the last 350 polls, they've topped those polls. And I think they are afraid. And the argument I've had with people on here, Mike, Howard, is this, Rogue, and we've said it before. A lot of people think that Nigel is part of the establishment. And I've tried to explain to people, to get into power, you have to become, or seemingly to become part of the establishment, to get inside, to win an election. You've got to win the masses, you've got, to get those votes. Once you're in power, then you can disrupt it. But the question people have is, will Farage do that? And I think that's been the big question. And I've been with a few different political parties all the time, but my principles haven't changed. My convictions haven't changed. I have my own, concerns about different parties. But at the end of the day, if we want to get rid of this Labour government, then the only way to do it, the only party right now that could beat the Labour Party is reform. It's as simple as love or hate them, that's the facts, and that's where I stand in it. But there is definitely a target on reform right now, 100%.
If there's a general election tomorrow, I'd vote reform.
And they still would have a pretty good chance of winning. Again, the establishment parties have decided that, King Andy Burnham of the North has won a by-election, therefore suddenly Labour are back. Labour are not back. Everybody still hates them. Everybody still thinks of them as the worst party that have run this country into the ground since the time, since the year dot, right? Nobody's going to vote for Labour in the next election. Nobody, right? Yeah. So this idea that somehow Reform are on the back foot and Labour are on the charge, good. Let them have an election then. Let's see how it goes. And I guarantee you, if they have an election in the next 2 months, which they should do, Reform, I think, storms it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was just thinking about, Richie, do you want to introduce the speech that Anne did, the MEP for the Brexit Party?
The last asset on the thing, is it?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Because I got to go soon.
I know you have.
Yeah, that's fine. Time's up. But I just want to quickly, I mean, she was very vocal in Brussels. We all know Farage's famous words, you're not laughing now. Yeah. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, which will resonate for us for many, many years to come. I'm sure will be played a lot more as well. But this is Anne speaking on behalf of the Brexit Party in Brussels at the European Union.
Great honour. Great honour to speak on behalf of the largest single party in this place. And may I say that if I needed any convincing at all, that the best thing for Britain is to leave here as soon as possible. It was the way that those elections were conducted yesterday. Because if that is this place's idea of democracy, then that is a serious betrayal of every country that is represented here. Because it is not democratic at all. And that is just one of many reasons why Britain is right to be leaving this place, hopefully on Halloween. And it is right because there is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. I represent the southwest of the United Kingdom.
Facciamo concludere.
And I found on my
Come to a conclusion, please.
first day that this place has decided, at least this place hasn't, the powers that be have decided to actually increase the size of fishermen's meshes, thereby reducing their income by 40%. That's what you do here. That's why we're going.
Grazie,
News
concluda.
long, wir gehen, we're off.
Absolutely brilliant.
What a great place to finish. That's fantastic.
I just love that.
And these bloody, jumped up wankers, frankly, sitting there going, oh, please, George's conclusion. You know, they were only allowed to speak for like a minute or 2 minutes was the maximum they had. You know, that's the European Union. You're not even allowed to make a speech for more than 2 minutes. And it was just incredibly ridiculous. And she was brilliant. And that's one of the great Ann Widdecombe speeches. Absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. So just to round it up, I had a look at sort of her thoughts on afterlife. And, you know, I think we can all hold this really close to our heart, and knowing that she knows and she believes that there is afterlife and that she is going to be going to heaven.
I know that I am going to have an afterlife, but I also know that I'm only going to have one go in this one. And as I say, that determines my attitude.
What a beautiful woman.
All I can say on that is, can you imagine being God and Ann Widdecombe turns up? You're thinking, oh, here we go.
Oh, guys, that's so
Peter
funny.
at the pearly gates, and you'd be like, oh, sorry, Anne, your name's not on the list. Excuse me, let me tell you now. Brilliant.
Oh, God. So there was a question which we asked Anne about who was her favourite composer. And what we felt that we'd like to do is play her favourite music on the way out. So that's going to be the end of our stream. And this is where I'm going to have a minute's silence for her, just listening to that on the way out. And I just want to recognise her life. I want to honour her life. And watching her and listening to you guys and how much respect and love you have for her, I want to take a piece of what she's given and I want to carry her with me, so we can carry that baton and carry that flame, and that I am Anne. Today, I am Anne, and that is what I'm going to do for you, for her, and for me, because what a privilege to be reflecting anything that she's ever done. What a woman.
Beautifully said. Well done.
Yeah.
So this is where we go. Big love to Anne, and thank you guys for coming on, and we hope to see you all again soon.